Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have one article here for you in this episode. I thought this was good enough just to put it all by. It's a little lonesome here. It's off of Zero Hedge, and it says, "What the hell is..." And there's some quotes that this starts off with. It says, "The older I grow, the more..." Well, wait a minute. Got to get the ad shut down here that's trying to play, and it's not cooperating with me, so hang on here. And it'll be done here in a second with its foolishness. There we go. And the quotes that it starts off with is, "The older I grow, the more distant the familiar doctrine that age brings wisdom." And that's by H.L. Mencken. And the next one here that it had, well, it's the same, almost the same thing. It says, "The older I get, the less I listen to what people say and the more I look at what they do." That was by Andrew Carnegie. It says, "I'm 53 years old. The older I get, the less sure I am about things I was sure about when I was 25 years old. I believed stocks for the long run was an unquestioned truth. I believed our economy was based on free market capitalism. I believed stock prices were based upon profits and cash flows. I believed a home was a place to live, not an investment. I believed the Catholic Church was run by good men doing good things. I believed journalists and the media were watchdogs working on behalf of the public. I believed our military was protecting our interest. I believed politicians legislated on behalf of the people. I believed the main purpose of bankers was to loan money to businesses and consumers in order to support economic growth." Boy, was I a dumbass. My skeptical nature, reliance on data I personally vetted, and judging our leaders based on what they've done versus what they say has allowed me to escape the matrix. I wasn't truly awakened until I watched Bush, Cheney, Powell, and the rest of the neocon provocators and the fake news mainstream media utilize propaganda to railroad Americans into a $6 trillion unnecessary war, resulting in 36,000 American casualties, the destruction of a country, and the creation of thousands of new Muslim terrorists. I've spent the last 14 years pushing back against the establishment narrative, documenting fake data published by government apparatchiks, and trying to open the eyes of as many people as possible to the propaganda utilized by the deep state to keep the ignorant masses dazed, confused, and distracted. The country is in deep trouble because what the majority believe regarding the economy, politics, religion, and culture just ain't so. What gets us into trouble is not what we don't know. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so," said Mark Twain. "Since the start of the year, I've found myself in a mental funk. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the incessant media propaganda. I'm tired of politicians. I'm tired of economist experts. I'm tired of hucksters touting their the end is near tale to sell me something. I'm tired of fellow mainstream media journalists and they're whining about Trump being mean and threatening the First Amendment. They don't know jack about the First Amendment, as they work for one of the 6 media conglomerates whose job it is to produce fake news supporting whatever narrative keeps their deep state benefactors in power. Regurgitating lines written for them by corporate propagandists is not journalism and has absolutely no relationship to the First Amendment. Over the last decade, the only place to find some truth has been the alternative media thriving on uncensored internet. That's why the establishment wants to regulate the internet. It's by a deep state flailing about, trying to retain their power and wealth, has reached frantic proportions. The left-wingers, egged on by Obama and funded by Soros, hold increasingly inane protests with themes like "wear a vagina hat to support feminazis," "hug an illegal immigrant," "everyone I hate is a Nazi," and "women take another day off and no one notices." The traitorous neocon warmongers like McCain, Graham, and Crystal see their enormously profitable, never-ending global conflict agenda at risk. The military-industrial complex needs enemies. The left-wingers and the neocons have joined forces to utilize fake Russian election intervention propaganda and last-ditch desperate attempt to derail the Trump presidency before it starts. The relentless bitterness and blatant disregard for the truth exhibited by Trump's vast array of opponents have made TV virtually unwatchable. I found myself mentally checking out. Why waste mental energy debating hacks, mental midgets, and paid trolls for the establishment? After spending years obliterating fake government statistics on a daily basis, I find continuing to do so is just mental masturbation with no ultimate satisfaction. Confronting left-wingers and neocons is like wrestling with a pig. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. I've always been an observer. I've been observing how certain both sides are regarding their positions on legal immigration, Muslims, Russia, Obamacare, Supreme Court nominees, executive orders, jobs, taxes, climate change, school choice, oil pipelines, and the First Amendment, Second Amendment, the rule of law, and the Bill of Rights. I find it exhausting. We're lost in a blizzard of lies. I'm not certain about anything. I will remain skeptical of everything uttered by all politicians, all government bureaucrats, all corporate executives, all central bankers, all media pundits, all religious leaders, all corporate paid journalists, and especially shysters. H.L. Mencken said, "Moral certainty is always a sign of cultural inferiority. The more uncivilized the man is, that he knows precisely what's right and what's wrong. All human progress, even in morals, has been the work of men who have doubted the current moral values, not of men who have whooped them up and tried to enforce them. The truly civilized man is always skeptical and tolerant in this field as in all others. His culture is based on I am not too sure." The dissonance between what I have been observing and what is being flogged by the establishment mouthpieces in corporate mainstream media has never been greater. Some of my observations are anecdotal. Others are based on real, unadulterated, truthful data. A few are based on simple common sense, and the rest are based on my understanding of what happens during fourth turnings. When you understand the cyclical nature of history, you are not surprised when the events lead to reactions among masses which take the linear thinking status quo by complete surprise. The 2008 global financial implosion and the subsequent election of Donald J. Trump by the deplorable white silent majority completely blindsided by the oblivious establishment, but were entirely predictable if you had studied previous forthcomings throughout history. I've been making a horrific 60-mile round trip commute into Philly for the last 10 years. The average daily commute has been about 2 hours, as the entire route has been under some sort of construction for the entire decade. A fantastic one-way commute is 45 minutes. I regularly have 90-minute commutes, and I've experienced a few which reached the 2-hour mark. It became immediately evident to me something changed as this new year got underway. My morning and evening commute has been consistently in the 45-minute range for months. There are less cars and trucks on the road. The question is why? This only happened once before over the last decade during the 2008-2009 recession, and a shocking correlation, especially for brain-dead tax and spend liberals. Jobs, there are less drivers on the road going to work. I tried to think of other reasonable explanations for why traffic appeared to be contracting so dramatically, but lo and behold, certain data can't be easily manipulated by the government. Gasoline demand is plunging with the with the year-over-year trend crashing to levels last experienced during the 2001 recession. Gasoline demand was higher during the 2008-2009 crisis. Demand was higher when oil was over $100 a barrel. Based on this crashing gasoline demand, Goldman Sachs issued a report saying we should be in a recession. Driven are dramatically slowing down. It's not because of electric cars or fuel efficiency, as the vast majority of the 17.5 million vehicles being hawked to the math-challenged driving public using low payment leases and 6-year 0% loans are or luxury sedans. The Fed-induced and subprime debt-fueled frenzy of vehicle sales, such as long-term rentals, has seen vehicle sales skyrocket from 10 million in 2010 to an all-time high above 17.5 million in 2016. While auto loan debt has soared from 700 billion to over 1.1 trillion during the same time frame. The truthfulness of the 17.5 million sales number may be in question, as dealer lots are stuffed with with a record number of cars in the hands of consumers. How could gasoline usage and miles driven crash? More questions emerge to those with critical thinking skills. If the unemployment rate is really 4.8%, how could 40% of the employable population, 102 million people, not be working? This explains the lack of cars on the road during my commute. Obama and his minions jabber about the tremendous jobs recovery during his reign of error. In 2007, there were 122 million full-time workers among a working age population of 233 million, or 52.3%. After Obama's 8-year economy recovery, there are 125 million full-time workers among a working age population of 254 million, 0.2%. We've added 3 million full-time jobs in the last 9 years, and the captured mainstream media touts this as a success story. The deceitfulness, it burns. 125 million full-time workers, of which 22 million are non-producing government drones, have to support 102 million non-working Americans, most living on the dole. You have a financial unsustainable paradigm. Trump's slogan should be, make America get off their fat asses and work again. The explanation for the plunge in gasoline demand and miles driven is quite simple. If you haven't drunk the mainstream media Kool-Aid about the fantastic economy, low unemployment, and soaring consumer confidence, Americans drive their vehicles to work, to shop, and to eat out. Truckers are the backbone of our just-in-time big box retail society. If Americans are driving less, there are less people with jobs, less spending at brick and mortar retailers, and fewer people eating out. If truckers are logging less miles, retailers are ordering less inventory, manufacturers are selling less widgets, and economy is contracting. The entire economic improvement narrative is based on soft data about feelings from consumer confidence surveys and dozens of other easily manipulated surveys. Propagandists are experts at convincing clueless dolts it's raining when their government is actually pissing down their backs. Despite government reports about expanding retail sales and strong holiday sales, real info from real retailers tells the true story. Have announced 1,500 store closings in the first 2 months of 2017, including 140 stores, Sears 150 stores, Macy's 68 stores, H.H. Gregg 88 stores, The Limited 250 stores, Abercrombie and Fitch 60 stores, Wet Seal 171 stores, CVS 70 stores. Target, Macy's, Sears, and dozens of other retailers reported awful holiday sales. Walmart was lauded for generating a 1% comparable store sales increase. There is virtually no store expansion by large retail chains. During the 2000 to 2007 period, these chains were each opening hundreds of new stores per year. We are in the midst of a long-term retail contraction, which is just picking up steam. The closure of these stores combined with rising interest rates are a toxic concoction for real estate mall developers. The Fed allowed them to extend and pretend for the last 8 years. The jig is up. A wave of retail and mall bankruptcies is baked in the cake. The government reported retail sales growth is driven by Fed-induced auto sales, leases, and loans. Homes furnishing sales financed at 0% over 5 years. Building materials stores offering 0% financing. Amazon, and until recently, restaurants and bar sales. Go into malls or many retail establishments and rarely eat at chain restaurants. My observations of retail and restaurant traffic are based on how full their parking lots are at peak hours. When the economy was in bubble mode prior to 2008, mall parking lots were jammed and you had a 90-minute wait to get a seat at Outback or Olive Garden. Today, you can get a parking spot at a big box retailer near the front door on a Saturday afternoon. Ghost towns with space available as the hot new location. Except for peak dinner time on a Friday or Saturday, even then, there are no longer long waits to get a table at one of a struggling chain of restaurants. We reached peak retail and peak overpriced restaurants a few years ago. The downward spiral due to demographics, declining real income, and oversaturation is irreversible. As usual with propaganda distributed by the government or industry organizers, they present a positive restaurant performance index based on false hope and delusional expectations. Restaurant chains like Applebee's, Outback, Ruby Tuesdays, Chili's, Buffalo Wild Wings, and many other major chains have been reporting declining same restaurant sales. Comparable restaurant sales are lower than 2 years ago. Outback parent company announced it will close more than 4 dozen locations of Outback Steakhouses, Bonefish Grill, Carrabba's Italian Grill, and Fleming's Prime Steakhouse. Ruby Tuesdays is closing 100 locations. Despite government reports showing strong restaurant sales over the last 8 years, annual traffic to U.S. restaurants has been flat or up just 1% since 2009, when there was 2% drop in the wake of Fed-created financial crisis. The increase in sales was generated by a price increase of 2 to 3% per year. Now these chains are paying the price for high prices, shitty food, and poor service from their college-graduated millennial staff. With higher taxes, soaring Obamacare costs, student loans, and auto loan debt up to their eyeballs, and low-paying service jobs as their career, even clueless millennials have gotten a clue. They don't have the money to eat out 4 times per week. With an ounce of common sense, knows the majority of Americans have fallen further behind since 2009, with only the establishment and those leeching off the establishment, the suffering of senior citizens and the former middle class. When real personal spending plummets at the highest rate since 2009 in the midst of a recession. As consumer confidence surveys, ISM surveys, and Fed surveys provide fake news about consumer and corporate feelings about a glorious future, the hard data tells the truth. How could households feel confident when real median household income fell by $558 in December and is down by $529 year over year? And his lapdogs in the mainstream media pontificate about the record economic recovery when real median income is 2% lower than it was 9 years ago. How can anyone deny the average American household has been experiencing a depression since 2000 when real median household income is lower today than it was at the turn of the century? Do you think the lack of income growth over the last 17 years may have played a part in the deplorables electing Trump in November? The corporate fake news media will continue to produce the false narrative as directed by their deep state employers. The credibility of journalists can be summed up in two pithy sentences by Hunter S. Thompson, and they are: the press is a gang of cruel faggots. Journalism is not a profession or a trade. It is a cheap catch-all for fuck-offs and misfits, a false doorway to the backside of life, a filthy piss-ridden little hole nailed off by the building inspector, but just deep enough for a wino to curl up from the sidewalk and masturbate like a chimp in a zoo cage. In part 2 of this article, I'll show the deep state embellishment ruling class status quo have utilized their mastery of propaganda techniques to convince the masses inflation and debt are beneficial to their interest, and why Trump's election is the pushback by citizenry who are beginning to awake and are mad as hell. So you might want to keep an eye on Zero Hedge for the other half of this gentleman's article. But I found this absolutely wonderful, refreshing compared to a lot of the dribble that is thrown out there. Tyler Durden was the author of that article. So if you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up and share it on your social media so everybody gets to enjoy it. And stay tuned for the next exciting bit of entertainment. I've got more articles for you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. That way you'll stay informed as well as entertained.